Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is the Not So Serious Keto video podcast. So with all of this C-word stuff going on, I've been a little bit lax in scheduling my annual checkup. Finally got in yesterday to see Dr. Jeffries, and he told me that I have the prostate of a 20-year-old. Now that's a great thing to hear, I guess. As far as compliments go, it's one of those things that you don't get a whole lot. It was a little bit weird to be told that from your dentist, though, but I mean, he's very thorough. And before you get all like, ooh, that's so gross, he did the oral exam first, so it's all good. I kid. My dentist is not named Dr. Jeffries. I just made that up to protect him. Incidentally, gentlemen, if you ever decide to use this joke, you do not need to give me credit. I would also probably advise against telling it in the workplace. However, when you do use this joke, make sure whomever you're telling it to is drinking coffee at the time. Timing is everything. Now this next topic is one that I had originally recorded last week for the podcast, but as I was editing together the video, we were already getting up around 25 minutes, and I knew that including this subject was going to take me well over 30, and I just didn't want to have a podcast that was that long. So we're shifting it to this week, and I'm re-recording the segment. About 2 weeks ago, I got a bread maker. Now I know some of you may be thinking right now, Steve, seriously? There's actually an appliance or kitchen gadget you didn't already own? Well, yeah. I mean, back when I was an artisan baker, I was kind of a bread snob, and I just felt that a bread maker was, beneath me. But then after trying out some of these commercially available, supposedly keto-friendly breads, like the Love and Fresh at Aldi and the Natural Ovens at Costco, first off on those, besides the fact that their taste is sort of meh, the slices are so small. They're like tiny little baby slices. And I want some heartier slices. I want something I can potentially make French toast from. I also bought the Dash Mini Pocket Maker Press. So I want to try that out, and I needed bread that was a little bit bigger. Incidentally, it is kind of hard to find a brand name bread maker anymore. If you get out onto Amazon, like the big names like Cuisinart, Hamilton Beach, some of those, they're just not out there. There's a bunch of brand names you've never heard of that have about 4-star average rating. It's all 5-star, like in bad English written reviews, and then fairly articulately written 1-star reviews, which leads me to believe that this may have been a brand where they paid some money to some folks offshore to write a bunch of positive reviews. That's just what I speculate. So I wasn't going to do that. I really wanted a Cuisinart. I like Cuisinart an awful lot as a brand, and I found one out on Kohl's.com. Got it, super excited. If you ever want to get a ton of emails, either give your email address to either political party in this country or give it to Kohl's. I bet that just in the length that this podcast has been going, I've already received probably 3 emails from Kohl's offering me Kohl's Cash or some sort of a discount. But anyhow, I got my bread maker, super excited. I get out onto YouTube, I type in the search bar, keto bread machine recipe. And what I got kind of disappointed me. And I'll tell you why. I got a couple recipes that I knew that I would get. I got the Deirdre's bread, and I got the recipe from I Don't Sugarcoat. And her recipe is essentially Deirdre's recipe, but instead of using golden flax meal, she uses lupin flour. But she's a class act. She gave Deirdre credit for it, and they're both good breads. In addition to those, there were 8 other bread machine recipes that were identical to Deirdre's. And of those, only 3 of them gave Deirdre credit for the original recipe. Now Deirdre did this like 4 years ago. She's only done, I think, 2 videos, and it's the same bread, one in a stand mixer, one in a bread machine. And it's a really, really solid bread. And I found it really kind of disheartening that so many people, including larger channels that have significantly more subscribers than Deirdre ever had, significantly more views on this particular recipe than Deirdre had, didn't give her credit. Now I know there's a saying, if you gave an infinite number of monkeys, an infinite number of typewriters, and an infinite number of time, eventually one of them would pound out the complete works of Shakespeare. So I know it's possible that two people working independently may stumble upon the same recipe, but a recipe that has the exact same 11 ingredients in the exact same quantities, and even certain words, like for the eggs, lightly beaten, that just comes off to me an awful lot like plagiarism. Anyone who's watched my channel for any length of time knows that I'm very much a give credit where credit is due sort of guy. If one of my channel members submits a recipe to me and I use it exactly, I give them credit. If I collaborate on a recipe with somebody, I give them credit. If someone is even an inspiration for a recipe, I give them credit. I mean, creating recipes is an awful lot of work. And to go and put a lot of effort into something and a lot of time into something and then to not get credit for it kind of hurts. And that's why I always make sure to give credit. I have gotten emails and direct messages from people who have told me about other channels on YouTube that have copied my recipes. And honestly, I'd rather not even know. Because in some of these instances, I have gone out, some of them looked similar to mine, not close enough that I personally would ever accuse them of copying, but some have taken a direct copy of my recipe. It's obvious. And in at least one instance, it was a fairly popular channel. It was someone that I liked. Notice the past tense there. I can't even watch her videos anymore just because of this behavior. And I wonder how many other recipes did she lift from other people and not give them credit. So the reason I bring this up is twofold. First, I give you my sincere word that I will continue to always give credit for any recipe that I make that is inspired by or lifted from or improved upon from someone else. And now that I have this bread maker, I'm going to be playing around with variations of the recipe from Deirdre and I Don't Sugarcoat. And if I come up with something better, I'm totally going to say, 95% of this or 99% of this was Deirdre or I Don't Sugarcoat. I would also ask that if you ever see a recipe that really appears to have been lifted from me, whether that's on a YouTube channel or a website, I would rather you not tell me about it. Just because I want to have as positive of an attitude about the keto community as possible. And when I see things like this, it just sort of sours me a little bit, and I don't want to feel sour. But it's up to you then. If you see someone that's clearly lifting recipes from other channels or from me, is that someone that you want to keep watching? And while we're on this topic, one other quick little note. I've started developing sort of a YouTube internet friendship with Papa G. If you haven't watched any of Papa G's videos, I encourage you to check out his channel. I love his style, I love his voice, and I'm really looking forward to some opportunities to collaborate with him on some recipes. So who knows, maybe you'll see some sort of a partnership video, a two-parter, I do something, he does something, and you combine the two recipes together. I don't know, but if you have not checked out Papa G's channel, I strongly encourage it. Super cool dude, I love his videos, check him out. In a couple of my previous podcasts, I had done reviews of some keto documentaries. The first one I did was Fat, a documentary. It always seems weird to me when I say that I reviewed the documentary Fat, a documentary. It's kind of like saying I read the USA Today today. But because this was the first one that I watched, I probably rated it a little bit higher than I should have, just because I had nothing to compare it to. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10. There were some things that kind of turned me off a little bit about it, and there were just a couple of segments that really sort of seemed like speed bumps to me, especially one where Vinny was on Oprah. It was weird and out of place. I did like the fact that they came after Ansel Keys pretty hard in that documentary, because I'm not a fan of that guy. I feel that he has done just incredible harm to the health of the world, honestly. And any documentary that rips on him pretty hard, I'm on board with. The next documentary that I reviewed was Magic Pill, which was on Netflix. I think it might still be on Netflix. And this I felt was a better documentary. It featured a number of different people changing their lives through low carb or a keto diet. And I think how much you enjoy it kind of depends on how much you can relate to the different subjects, the different people that were in this documentary. Thing is, a significant part of the documentary had to do with Australian Aboriginals. And while that's interesting, it's interesting seeing how the dietary influences of the West really had this detrimental effect on their health. I don't think most of us are Australian Aboriginals. I mean, I haven't actually looked at my YouTube analytics, but I'm guessing it's probably a very, very small piece of my viewership. And watching that, I think I probably gave that an 8, and I think it probably pushed Fat, a documentary, down to about a 6 on a 10 scale for me. Well, last night I watched Fat Fiction, which is currently free on Amazon Prime. And here's the real short version. Awesome. It is great. I'm probably going to give it a 9 out of 10, and I'll give you my pros and a couple of tiny little cons about it right now in this review. I knew that I was going to like this movie before the credits even rolled. In the pre-credit sequence, you have a number of different experts. You've got Tim Noakes, Jason Fung, Gary Taubes, Sarah Hallberg, Zoe Harcum, Nina Teicholz, I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly, and Dr. Mark Hyman, who's the narrator of this documentary. And I think he's got a great narration voice. The weird thing is, for me, whenever he was on camera, it felt suddenly like it turned into a bit of an infomercial. I don't know if it was the way the camera was set up, the way he was talking to the camera, somewhere between like a Dateline sort of a segment, you know, where the reporter periodically cuts in and talks just so you can see him or her, and some sort of a infomercial type of thing, you know, a charity thing where they're saying, for just $1 a day, you can support this African village. Like the way he articulated seemed like a little much, like sort of overdoing the facial expressions and the mouth movement. But great narration voice. Really loved his narration. Oh, and Eric Westman, also he's on there. I'm missing some names, I'm sure, but a lot of people that if you are familiar with the whole keto community and experts, you're going to recognize some names and faces, and they're going to be people that you like because they're all very articulate, they're all very intelligent, there's a great balance. Everybody seems to get sort of an equal amount of screen time, which I really liked. They're also all great teachers because they explain things very well in understandable terms. They use metaphor a lot, which I love. There's one, and I think it might be Zoe Harcum that does this one, about a baseball team. And if a baseball team is bad for 50 years, you can't blame the players. You need to blame the organization. You need to blame management and their strategy. And she uses this as a metaphor for what's been going on for the last 50 years and health and obesity and diabetes. So great metaphors, love it. There are also a lot of really great visuals. This is a very professional looking documentary between things like infographics, use of old commercials, archival news footage. Very slick, very well done. Right up front, this documentary hits you with some pretty shocking data. For example, in the United States, we're at a point now in 2020 where 75% of people, I'm assuming it's adults, but maybe not, maybe it's just all people now, 75% are overweight or obese. 50% have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And Gary Taubes suggests that the direct financial impact on our healthcare industry of this is $1 billion a day. That's just staggering. One of the other stats slash metaphors slash infographics talks about if you were to take all of human history and condense it down to 1 calendar year, it wasn't until the final day of the year that humans started consuming grain. And it wasn't until the final hour of that year that humans started consuming sugar. So when people talk about keto or low carb, high fat being unsustainable, it's been sustainable for the majority of human history. And that's another thing that I just love about this documentary, and I'll probably need to watch it again just so I can memorize some more of these talking points, is that there are a lot of great talking points that you can use as a counter to people who are arguing against keto or low carb as your dietary lifestyle. So the documentary is really kind of divided into a couple of chunks. One is on a test. It's just a 2-week test, but on 3 subjects. The first week, they eat a nice, clean keto diet. The second week, they go back to the standard American diet, or what is recommended by the USDA. And that was fun to watch. I mean, anybody that's been doing keto for any length of time probably knew what to expect, but it's still fun to watch somebody experience the benefits of keto and then go back to their old way of eating and just how awful it makes them feel. Good stuff. In addition to those 3 subjects, there are a number of other stories of people peppered in throughout the documentary. I didn't find any of them annoying or unlikable. There were a couple of people that I thought, yeah, I can totally relate to. There were a couple of people where I saw friends or family members sort of in that particular person and thought, wow, maybe if I showed this video to them, the light bulb will go on and they'll realize that they need to make a change. One of the sort of cons in all of this is some of the doctor-patient interactions that they show felt a little bit scripted. It didn't feel entirely natural to me, kind of like, hey, we're on camera, so I got to make sure that I say all of these things as the doctor to my patient. And it almost felt a little bit leading in a way. I felt that some of those scenes could have been a little bit more organic. Of course, there's one of those pantry cleaning scenes in it. There's a woman cleaning out her pantry, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty much what our pantry looks like. It's about 80% the rest of the family, just non-keto garbage stuff, and I gotta dig through all of that stuff to find my keto stuff. I would love to be able to do a pantry cleaning like that, and a fridge cleaning, and a freezer cleaning, and have a pure keto food stash in my house. I felt so jealous just watching that scene. The documentary also connects the dots between the disease that so many of Americans are going through and big food / big pharma. And in that I include the USDA, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association. Inflammation is the #1 cause of disease, and sugar is the primary culprit behind inflammation. And sugar and grain and big food influence a lot of research. There are organizations that we ought to trust, like the American Heart Association, that makes a significant amount of money by putting their stamp of approval on food products. And when they're out pumping this low-fat, high-carb diet and dietary guidelines, it's disheartening. It's disheartening to see. Especially here in the United States, we've become so indoctrinated with this message. There's a quote from Dr. Jason Fung. He says, if you repeat things long enough, sooner or later, people are going to believe you. I would take that a step further. If you say things long enough and often enough, sooner or later, not only do you believe yourself, but it becomes virtually impossible for you to shift from that position. And that's a big message in this documentary. We are paying a hefty price in our health because of a handful of people and a handful of organizations being unwilling to admit that they're wrong. You have people who have been trained as doctors and dietitians who their whole identity is sort of based on a lie. And I'm not blaming them. This was how they were taught. And it's very hard when you are taught and indoctrinated into something to shift that belief. It's hard to say that you're wrong. An example of this in the documentary is they talk about the American Diabetes Association and their approach to dealing with diabetes through diet. It's less than 1% effective, and yet they continue to push this. So when your whole identity is based on something that's wrong, it's very hard for you to shift positions. One person who did shift positions was Dr. Tim Noakes. He realized that he was wrong, he admitted it, he changed his stance, he started promoting keto, and he paid a price for it. The medical governing body in South Africa basically took him to court for medical malpractice for preaching low carb. Now, if you don't know how this story ended, I think it's in Magic Pill where they do a better job showing his story. But rather than spoil the conclusion on that, I'll just let you watch the documentary. One thing I will tell you is I don't know that I have ever seen a happier person than Tim Noakes. You watch his interviews, and this is a man who it's hard not to just feel a tremendous sense of warmth and affection for him. I don't know how much of that is just that he feels liberated that he went low carb or what, but it's super cool. I always get really happy whenever I see Tim Noakes. Another thing that they touch upon sort of towards the end of the documentary is on vegetable oils and seed oils. So we've got Jason Fung talking about how not only are we guiding people away from good oils, we're guiding them towards bad oils, and then further compounding the tragedy by hydrogenating them, just creating the worst possible inflammatory thing you can put into your body, right up there with sugar. And I'll be honest, in terms of clean keto versus dirty keto, that was something that maybe I was a little bit cavalier about, using corn oil or vegetable oil. After watching that little segment, I've kind of been shocked away from that. Those are out of the pantry for me now. It's pretty disgusting to actually watch this stuff get made. There's also a little bit at the end on the agricultural impact, the positive agricultural impact of grass-fed pastured animals. I feel like they missed an opportunity to tie the additional cost of that being offset by the healthcare cost. I mean, if we took that $1 billion a day that Gary Taubes talked about, and instead of funneling that into the healthcare industry and the drug industry, encouraged farmers to pasture the right way, to farm the right way, to follow like the model of Joel Salatin and Polyface Farms, which they could have totally included in this as well. That would have been another opportunity. That really would have been a great way, I think, to put a ribbon on all of this, because I think still there's that objection from some people about the cost of keto. I also felt that they could have gone after Ansel Keys a lot harder than they did. They did talk about how he ignored the whole Minnesota coronary experiment, which was one of the best experiments on fat and diet in history, just because it was very, very well controlled, but didn't like the results, never got published. But I think they really could have gone after Ansel Keys a little bit harder. And that would have gotten this to a 10 out of 10 for me. In the end, I don't know that I could recommend this any higher than I do. It is an amazing documentary. You will come away inspired. There are moments you will come away sad. You will look at some of the food that people eat. You will look at pantries, and you will look at shopping, and you will look at restaurant items, and you are just going to shake your head. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people eat that way. I can't believe I used to eat that way. And you're going to want to show this documentary to other people, to friends and family. And I don't know how well that'll work. I'd love to show it to my family. I know they won't watch it. I kind of believe that you can't push the truth on people. People need to come to the truth. Sadly, most people aren't going to come to the truth on this until their health requires that they come to the truth. And that's a little bit sad as well. But ultimately, great documentary. I promise you, by the time the end credits roll, you're going to be somewhere between goosebumps and tears. I think I had a little bit of both. And that is it for this podcast. Thanks for watching or listening.